Hello Saviors, and welcome to this video tutorial on the add-on ExtendedUI2 by Mizuki Belhi. Much like my previous video on Muteki 2 EX, I have found that most people who I show this add-on to are initially very excited by the idea of it, but then find themselves highly perplexed by how to actually use it once they have it installed. So I have decided to create this video tutorial completely by choice and not at threat of risk to my life. Totally not gonna get shot in the face if I don't do this. So, what is ExtendedUI2? It is an add-on that will allow you to move around most of the various elements of your user interface and also resize a few of the elements of your user interface. So I will be making a separate video on how to install add-ons and the add-on manager in general. That one probably won't be very long, unlike this one, which I'm sure will be very rambly. So I'm going to assume that you have the add-on installed already. And once you do, there will be this little add-ons button in your lower right menu. And if you click it, it will expand menu buttons for your add-ons that you have installed, which have their own dedicated menus, including ExtendedUI, or ExtendedUI2, rather. The tooltip is inaccurate. Mizuki, you need to update your tooltip. So when you press that, you will get this little menu, and your screen will be filled up with all these squares in this grid. The squares are used for moving your various interface pieces around by certain amounts. So when you open the options menu, you will be given these options. And I'm going to go over these first. Remove loaded message is the first tick box. Removes the ExtendedUI loaded message on startup. Personally, I've never noticed an ExtendedUI loaded message on startup, but presumably ticking this would get rid of it. It would probably in your chat log here or something. Maybe I've just never noticed it because I'm not paying attention. I don't know. The next one here, hide buttons from joystick quick slot. Removes the set1/set2 buttons from the joystick quick slot. So I'm just going to hop into controller mode real quick to show you. And it's talking about these two buttons right here, the L1 plus R2 swapping thingy moetsits. So if I tick this, then those buttons go away. Personally, I don't think I would like that. If I was playing in controller mode, I would like to have a visual representation of which set I'm working in. But I don't play in keyboard mode, so I don't care. But I'm sure many of you who do would. In fact, in my experience, I find that I think most people play this game in controller mode. So, although I think I may have said keyboard mode a second ago, but that's true too. I don't play in keyboard mode either. But yeah, I meant to say controller mode. If I said keyboard, I meant to say controller. Okay, next item, show Exp Numbers. Shows exact experience numbers when hovering over the experience bars. Updates after map change. So with this, if you mouse over your experience bars, you can see the exact amount of experience that you have and require. You see here it says 100% out of 100%, but then it gives the exact figures. What is that? 159 million? 367? No. 1,593,675,776 out of the same. However, when it comes to your character experience, I noticed that once you hit level 440, it stops working. In this case, it says 0 out of 0 because I'm capped at level 450. But in my personal experience anyway, once I hit level 440, it stopped giving me actual figures and just gave me the percentages. Maybe that's been fixed now. I'm not sure because this add-on does get updated. So our next item here, disable recipe item pop-up. Disables the pop-up when getting an item for crafting. I'm sure you've noticed that when you pick up an item that is required as an ingredient for a crafting recipe that you have, it will announce that recipe at the top of the screen. And this option to disable that is very welcome because once you get high level and start running CMs a lot and getting nuclear powder all the time, you're going to be seeing those pop-ups an awful lot. You'll run a CM, you'll get some nuclear powder, and then you'll have to wait for 50 some odd pop-ups to painfully and slowly go by one at a time. And that is exceptionally annoying, especially when you're running CM several times a day. So thank you very much, Mizuki Belhi, for this option. I very much appreciate it. I'm a big fan of options, and this is one I really like. Our next option here is lock quest log position. Locks the quest log so it no longer moves in both directions when new quests are added or removed. Presumably, this makes it so that your quest log will fill from the top down instead of the middle out. I'm just going to untick this and see what happens. Nothing on my end anyway, so not exactly sure what that does. Maybe it's because I've moved the quest log. But so next we've got language options. We've got Chinese, which doesn't seem to work for me. We've got Polish. We've got Japanese, which also doesn't seem to work for me. Maybe you need something installed, some sort of add-on for Chinese or Japanese support, or I don't know. Maybe you need to be using a Chinese or Japanese version of the client. Who knows? I don't know. We've got a Portuguese translation, and we've got German, sehr gut. So I speak English, obviously. So English. Grid size. It's set to 16 by default. I've never felt a reason to change it. This changes the size of the grid, as you can see, that occupy the screen. So let's set this back to 16. So I forgot to mention what the grid actually does. The grid is for snapping when you are moving something with the mouse, when you're removing an element of the user interface with the mouse. Keep in mind, though, that moving UI elements with the mouse is precarious at best. It does not always work. It only seems to just work when it feels like it. But to demonstrate, I have the chat input here working for mouse dragging at the moment. So if I drag this with the mouse, we see that as it moves in increments equivalent to the grid. So it snaps to the grid. If I were to come into here and increase the grid size, then we see that our chat input has much larger increments of movement as we move it. So let's bring that back down to 16. And put that back, it was about here-ish, it's fine. Also, this little green button here, this green check mark, I forgot to mention this too. If this is checked, then as the tooltip suggests, it will snap to the grid. But if we untick this, then we don't snap to the grid anymore, and we just have individual pixel movement. Now, buff icon size, currently set to 32 by default. So let's throw up some buffs. And I believe I need to close this to get them to show. Yeah, there we go. And so now let's go back in here. If I change the buff icon size, I can radically increase the size of these things or decrease them very significantly. So 32 is the default, and again, I've never felt a need to change that. I've been comfortable with 32. Extend buff display. Extends the buff display to show a maximum of 30 buffs. Now this perplexes me because we've got this bar down here, displayed amount. Amount of buffs displayed. And it's set to 34 here, and it's really low. So we can see this can go a lot higher. 200. Jesus Murphy. Okay. No, not 32. 34. Oftentimes when you change buff settings, they will disappear until you reload your UI. Or maybe they'll reappear when I close this menu. I'm not sure. And then the amount in row slider determines how many buffs are shown before a new row is started. So I have it set to 17. So my buffs will show 17 buffs in one row before starting a second row. And my maximum is 34, so I can have up to 2 rows of 17 buttons. Buff icons. 2 rows of 17 icons. So I'm not exactly sure what this button is all about when we've got this slider here. They seem to conflict, but whatever, it's there. Maybe you can figure it out. Maybe you can put it in the comments if you know exactly what the difference is. So, okay, next up we have a new feature that was added in a recent update at my request, which I asked Mizuki to add in, which she was kind enough to oblige. And also, I apologize if you're actually a dude, Mizuki, but I get the impression that you're a chick, so I'm going with she until someone corrects me. We've got flow direction right, left, and flow direction bottom, top. If these are unticked, then your buffs will flow, or fill, if you will, from bottom to top and left to right. If this one is ticked, then your buffs will fill from right to left instead of from left to right. And if this one is ticked, your buffs will fill from bottom to top instead of top to bottom. That is to say, the bottom row will fill before the top row fills. So my 2 rows of 17 buffs, the bottom row of 17 buffs will fill, and only when that row fills will the top row start filling, which is the opposite of how the game normally has it. As you can see, I have my interface stuff all focused on the bottom, so I like my buffs to show up on top of my whatever you call this. World of Warcraft would call this a unit frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this a unit frame because that works for me. So I like to keep my buffs on top of my unit frame instead of below my unit frame. So I don't want my buffs to start filling up here and then do a second row below it like this, so that most of the time I have a big gap between my unit frame and my first row of buffs. No, I like my buffs to start filling on the bottom row, and then when that row fills up, only then does the top row start to fill. So that's why I have this flow direction bottom to top ticked. And likewise, this will make your buffs fill from right to left instead of left to right, in the individual rows, that is. So, okay, next up we've got always show seconds. Shows XS instead of XM. That is to say, X seconds instead of X minutes. So if this is, let's say you have a buff that lasts for 2 minutes. If this is not ticked, then that buff will read 2M. If this buff is ticked, that buff will read, did I say if this buff is ticked? I mean if this option is ticked, sorry, then that buff will read 120S rather than 2M. Personally, I don't like the idea of that because you can get buffs that are going to get into several thousand seconds, and unless you have very large icons, then those duration texts are going to bleed into one another. Nobody likes that. Or at least I don't like that. Maybe you don't care. I don't know. So then you've got this Restore Defaults button, which does exactly what you would expect it to. It restores all of these options to default. I don't know if it restores everything else about the add-on, all of this stuff to default as well. And I don't want to click it to find out. Because if it does, then I'm going to have to reset everything, and that'll be a giant pain in the patoot. So, okay, that's it for the options menu. Aside from that, you've got this little box right here, and this is where all of the magic happens. Well, most of the magic. Aside from this magic, this is where all the magic happens. So, you've got this advanced button, which will bring up a bunch of options here. I'll just leave that unticked for now, but I'll bring it back up in a moment. This pull-down list contains all of the items in your user interface that you are able to move and sometimes resize using this add-on. So it starts with non-selected, which means that there's non-selected. That's pretty self-explanatory. The first item is the quest log, although I've noticed that the order of this list seems to jump around at random. I don't know what's up with that. So for now, anyway, quest log is the first item in the list. And with many items, you can just drag them from the darkened region, but with this one you can't. Or at least I've noticed since the last update that some of the items can't be moved by mouse anymore. I'm not sure what's up with that. I'm pretty sure that you used to be able to move everything with the mouse, but now you can only move some of the things with the mouse. At any rate, this darkened region represents the area of the frame. All of these individual items, I will be referring to them as frames. So this frame, the quest log, occupies this space indicated by the darkened region. And if we click the advanced button here, we will get these options for it. We have position X and position Y. The position X slider represents the horizontal location of the item on the screen, and it is anchored to the left wall. So the left wall of the frame is the anchor point. So 0 is the left screen, like the left wall of the screen, and this left wall of the frame is what it's anchored to. So if I move this all the way to the right, then the left wall of the frame is lined up with the right side of the screen. And Y is the vertical position, and 0 is the top of the screen, and 1080 is the bottom of the screen. So yeah, you can move those. So we've got show frame here, and if we untick this, then the frame just goes away altogether. You don't see your quest log anymore. If you want to just get rid of your quest log and never look at it again, or your quest tracker, I should say. Your quest log is actually this. That's something different. If you don't want to see your quest tracker, if you want to just get rid of the fucker altogether, then you can untick this box to get rid of it, and I don't think it'll come back. It says visibility will not be saved, but in my experience, the visibility is saved. So if you untick that, it won't come back. To the best of my knowledge, anyway. Then you've also got make visible on hover. This will make it so that the frame is normally hidden, but it will become visible if you move your mouse over it. See, if I take my mouse off, it goes away. If I move my mouse on, it appears. So that's what make visible on hover does. So I'm going to get rid of that. Now, the next item. Okay, so the show frame and the make visible on hover and the position XY, these are on pretty much everything. All of these individual frames pretty much have these. So I'm not going to go over these every single time, although I might remind once or twice. So okay, next up we have the rest quick slot. And the rest quick slot is your quick slot bars while you are sitting. See, we have the rest quick slot here, and if I move this from 704, it can be moved all around. Well, maybe not all around. Can I drag this with my mouse? I cannot. So, okay, back to 704-ish. Mizuki, if you are watching, please, I would really appreciate it if you would add in text boxes here where I can manually input my own specific number with the keyboard by pressing the actual number keys so that I can type 704 in order to put that back where it was exactly. Because these sliders have a tendency to skip numbers. So please, please make that a thing in a future update. I beg you. I implore you. Next up, let's just stand back up again. Next up, we have minimap buttons. That is these 4 buttons underneath the minimap. We've got the BGM player, the zoom in, zoom out, and the map button. And if you've never noticed before, yes, there is, in fact, a BGM player. It's like an in-game media player. How awesome is that? I only just found that out today when I was doing this video the first time. I accidentally had my mic muted. So I'm doing this all over again. I hope you appreciate it. Next up, we have, where are we at? Minimap buttons. The mini guild mission. What is this? That, right, that is the PvP button, the Team Battle League button. I don't actually engage in Team Battle League. Maybe I will in the future, but for now I don't, so I keep this hidden because I don't really need it. Next up, we have durability. And some of these, as you probably noticed with the rest quick slot, which should not still be showing, but is for now, because sometimes when you're messing around with these options in here, things will stay showing when they actually shouldn't, until you either close the menu or reload your UI by going through a loading screen, like changing channels, relogging, going to a different map. Then everything will fix itself. But you probably noticed with the rest quick slot that the darkened area, let me just put that back up, is woefully and egregiously off kilter. I'm sure this is not Mizuki's fault. This is probably the fault of the developers. Maybe the developers actually have a good reason for this. Sometimes game development stuff can be really obscure. They can have really weird reasons for doing things that are not at all intuitive. So maybe there's a good reason that the game developers did it this way. But for whatever reason, it's done this way. I really don't think that Mizuki did this. Mizuki's just working with what she's got to work with. So some of these items, the darkened area that indicates the region for the item, for the frame, is very much off kilter. Like we see that the rest quick slot bars are not even in, oh, they're just a sliver in the actual region. Some of them are just like that. And the durability frame is one such item. You can't see it right now because my gear is not damaged. But if I had damaged gear, you would see my durability frames appearing about here-ish, which is not inside the actual frame, the region frame. So when I say region, what I mean is this darkened area. So I'm going to call that region for the duration of this video, so you know what I'm talking about when I say that. The next item is the menu, which is this menu in the bottom right-hand corner. And because its region spans the entire width of the screen, and unfortunately these values cannot go into the negatives. So I cannot push this any further to the left because it can't go left. I can push it to the right off screen, but it can't go off the left screen. So unfortunately, if you want to move your lower right menu to, say, the upper left corner, make it an upper left menu instead, I'm afraid you're just shit out of luck. It does not have the ability to go into the negatives. Mizuki, again, please, if I had text boxes here that I could just type in the value that I wanted for the coordinate, then I would be able to do negative values, at least in theory. Maybe it would crash the game. I don't know. Maybe that's why you don't have that. But in theory, at least, I would then be able to input negative values and have this menu go on the left side of my screen if I wanted to. I actually don't want to, but some people might want to. So next we have this cast bar thing. Frankly, I have absolutely no idea what this is. It might be for spells that have a cast time, like the wizard spell Energy Blast, for example, or Fireball. But in my experience, my cast bar is still down here, despite the fact that I've moved it here. And I only moved it here for testing purposes. I wouldn't actually necessarily want it to be there. I just was trying to test it. So I haven't actually been able to figure out what this supposed cast bar is. It does not affect things like the progress bar when you're worshiping a statue. That's what I was hoping it would be, because my statue worship bar shows up like right here and kind of covers my party frame a little bit here. And it's not the end of the world, but it's not exactly choice either. So I wanted to move that, and I can't figure out what moves it. It's not this cast bar. I don't know what this cast bar is. Next we have the tapping key. Again, I don't know what this is either. I presume that this is either for some quest or for some class that I have never done or never played, and so I don't know what this is about. But for people who do use this, whatever it is, there it is. You can move it. Great. Next up we have channel. That is the channel selector pull-down list. That includes the text, the actual bar thing, the dots representing the population, and the button. The entire thing moves as a single unit. Next we have time, which is your clock right here. You can move your clock. Next, we have target info. That is this here, the HP and MP. Well, not the MP, but the HP and the name and the level of your target and their type as well. So like boss HP bar, for example. Next, we have the fever combo. I have it moved over here because I find it personally to be very obnoxious how it's all up in your face here by default. I don't like that. I've moved it out of the way. Right underneath my challenge bar, which I have right here. Next up, we have playtime, which is this that I have up here. Now, I could be mistaken, but I don't think that this playtime feature is actually accessible in any way unless you have this add-on installed. So I have no idea how Mizuki found this to be able to show it and move it in the first place, to even know it existed. Maybe she's like gone through all the code. I don't know. But what this shows is the entire duration of time that your character has been logged in over the course of their entire lifetime. Not just this session, but from the day you made your character. So my character here has been online for 63 days and 24 hours in total, not including time spent offline, but all of my online sessions combined have totaled 63 days, 24 hours, and 45 minutes on this character. I wonder why that doesn't say 64 days, 0 hours, and 45 minutes. I'm sorry, it's 64 days. I'm pretty sure I just said 63 again. I don't know why this does not say 64 days, 0 hours, and 45 minutes. That would make a little bit more sense. Maybe it doesn't roll over into... Oh, wait a minute. Is that a 1? No, I think that says 24, right? Oh, no, that does say 21. Okay, that's why. I had to look really closely at that. Okay, 63 hours, 21 minutes, and 40... I'm all over the place. 63 days, 24 hours, and 46 minutes I have been online with this character. Although I noticed that M is actually cut off a little bit. Maybe I need to expand to the region, because many of these items will not show outside of their region, which is going to be very important when we get to the buffs. Where is that now? Time? No, not time. Playtime. Let me... Oh, there's no option to expand the region. So that's unfortunate. Okay, not a big deal, though. Let's see. Time, target info, playtime. Next up is the FPS, which, despite the fact that the region is showing here, that is actually for this down here. That shows your memory, your frames per second, and your latency in milliseconds. So if I move this, and move this to left or to the right, etc., or up or down, you know, whatever. You can move that wherever you want it. And if you're wondering about this, about how I have this being displayed at all, this is not from an add-on. If you don't know about it already, this is in the settings menu. It is right here, see frame data. You want to tick that so you can see your FPS, your memory, and your latency. So next up we have God Roulette, which for now is the stamp tour button. But this represents whatever unique event button might be around your minimap at the time. At least that's my understanding. Next up we have experience bars, which again, the region is showing up here, but it's actually, like the bars are actually down here. So you can move that wherever you want. If, when you first installed this add-on and then booted up the game, if your experience bar was showing in the middle of your screen, then you have an outdated version of this add-on and should go and update it. Because in the most recent update, that was fixed. So next up we have event button, which is the news button. I don't know why it's called event button rather than news button. Maybe Mizuki has named these after what the game actually calls them in their internal programming. That would make sense, I suppose. Because oftentimes what's named in the internal programming is different from what a game will actually show it as. I do programming, so I have at least some knowledge about such things. Now I don't feel a need for this button, so I don't show it. I have it hidden by just unticking the show frame button. And where are we now? Experience bars, event button, TP shot button. That's the next one. That's this. It's the TP shot button. Fairly self-explanatory. Most of these are fairly self-explanatory. Next up, we have the party frame, which is down here. What I have moved it down here. By default, it's over here on the left. But I've moved it down here because I like to keep everything that matters, everything that's important in combat, in one place altogether. Because I am a healer, and I need to keep a constant eye on health bars. And if I have to move my focus, like over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, constantly moving my focus, excuse me, moving my focus back and forth, that's fairly detrimental in combat. People can get killed because of that. So I like to keep everything all together in one place. Many years ago, my best friend in real life asked me to make him a custom interface in World of Warcraft that was designed specifically around his astigmatism, because for him, moving his vision around the screen was a really big deal. He'd have to like move his whole head to refocus his vision somewhere else on the screen. So at his request, I made an interface where everything that mattered was all focused in one spot. And when I did that, I realized that despite the fact that I don't have astigmatism, that's just actually a really good idea. So I've been doing that ever since in MMOs, and I find it works great. There are less mishaps that way. At any rate, I have requested to Mizuki Belhi to incorporate a feature that will allow one to swap the position of the HP bars and the buffs in the party frame, so that the icon and the bar will be on the right, and the buffs will be on the left, and for the buffs to fill from right to left. That way, I can have the bars even closer to my buttons, and my focus can be even more well focused. I don't think that she's actually going to incorporate this feature, unfortunately. She doesn't seem to want to come outright and say that she's not going to do it, but she seems fairly reluctant to do it, and I don't think that it's going to happen, unfortunately. But nevertheless, this add-on is still spectacular, and I love it all the same. So no hard feelings. At Valkyrior, that is my guild, our motto is good enough is good enough. And frankly, this is, in fact, good enough. Okay, next up we have minimap area text. Now, this is where things get a little bit confusing, or at least unintuitive anyway. You'll see that these two items after the minimap area text have these arrows, equals, equals, greater than. These like arrows pointing to these two items. That means that these two items belong to this item, the one above them. Then the minimap area text, that is up here on the minimap, this text, let me just nudge that over one. There we go. Okay, that's good. This minimap text, minimap area text, I should say, this is specifically for the region for the text. That is to say, this darkened area right here. And the text that we'll show here is the map text and the map area text. So if you are in a map that has sub-areas that each have their own individual names, which is pretty much all the maps that aren't cities for the most part, with a very small handful of exceptions, then that sub-area name will appear below the map name. And the map name text and the map area name text are their own individual items here, these two here. Despite the fact that minimap area text has the word text in its name, which would lead you to conclude that this is for text, it's actually for the region that the texts appear in. This one is the actual text. This one is the actual text. But this one just dictates the region. So you've got the X and Y sliders to move the position of the region, as you just saw. But you've also got the W and H sliders to resize the region. It will not resize the text. It will only resize the region. So if I take this H, which is at 67, and make it larger, then the region gets taller. Let's move this back to 67, if I can. 71, that'll do. And furthermore, this is the really important part about these regions. If there's a region item like this one, minimap area text, that has sub-items that belong to it, like map name and area name, then these items can only appear within the region. So if I take this Y position, for example, on this minimap area text, I hope I can move this back to 10. And I try to move it down. As soon as it goes out of the region, it is no longer visible. But if I go to the map area text region and make the region taller, look at that. There it is down there. So you can only actually see sub-items within their parent items region. 71. Can I move this back to 10? Probably not. I'm going to have to approximate it probably. And, all right, 8 will do. Now, the next up we have the notice. And this is for server messages, like, for example, when a Vivora item drops. And you get that announcement telling you, such and such Lucky Jagoff just got a Vivora, and now you get to cry in green envy. That message. If you move this, then that will appear elsewhere. Or things like the server telling you that a maintenance is going to be happening soon, or, that sort of thing. At least I'm pretty sure that's what that is. I would bet $5 that that's what that is, but I've never actually tested it to be certain. Next up, we have the Mercenary shop button, which is, as it says, the Mercenary shop button. You can relocate that wherever you want. Not sure what just happened there. Next up, we have the Control Target Lock, which I've got this down here. But Control Target Lock does not actually work in mouse mode. It literally does nothing in mouse mode. So it's not relevant to me. You can't enable Control Lock in mouse mode, so not relevant to me. But for those of you who use keyboard mode, you might like to know that. Next up, we have Summon Info. And this is for your summon info. It tells you like how many summons you have, what their HP is. I think it tells you their HP. I don't remember exactly. I haven't played my summoner in several weeks, and to be honest, I don't play my summoner all that much. But I do have a summoner alt, so this is relevant to me. But this is one of the frames that, or not. Okay, when I tried to do this earlier in the previous take, I was able to move this with the mouse. By dragging it, but not this time, I guess. But yeah, you can reposition this, and I don't think that this is one of those frames that's way larger than it needs to be. I don't think it ever occupies anything close to this amount of space. But yeah, there it is. And this is another thing that exists because I requested it of Mizuki Belhi. And this is the thing where you can toggle between showing your party members or showing your summons, which normally appears over here on the left side of the screen. Next up, what do we have next? Whoops, I'm too far. Next we have target buffs. And this, you can tell due to the fact that it has items under it that have these arrows. The fact that these arrows are here means that this button, this frame, target buffs, is the owner, or parent, if you will, of these 4 items here. And again, like other parent items, this only dictates a region. it doesn't actually have the buffs themselves. The buffs reside in that region. So we have self-applied buffs here that will show in that region. Although, why is the green not showing? Is it too low? Okay, yeah, I guess the vertical frame doesn't remember, because I had changed that to be lower, but I actually haven't played with these settings until prior to today. I've only been getting a small handful of debuffs showing on the bosses, and I haven't really done anything about it. I've meant to do something about it, but it's just kept on slipping my mind. So when I did the previous take trying to record this video, I played with these a bit, and I resized the target buffs region to be wider and taller, and it seems to remember the width, but it does not seem to remember the height change that I did, so that's conspicuous. But we've got self-applied buffs, unaffected buffs. I'm going to move that up a little, and we've got debuffs, which I have set to the top here, and buffs from others, which I don't think really matters because mobs don't really get buffs from others. But I'm just going to move that over here. Now, I don't know if it will spill out past the green area or not. I'm actually yet to test that because, like I said, I only started playing with this in my previous take of this video. Maybe I'll do another video explaining the target buffs, how exactly they line up and whatnot, after I've had a chance to really toy around with it and learn how they work. Next up, we have chat input, which is the chat bar here when you press enter. And next we have keyboard/mouse mode quick slot bars. And so that is my quick slot bars here. I have this set 672. I'll try to remember that. If I move this, you'll see that I can move my quick slot bars. 672. There we go. Now, you'll notice that they all move together as a single unit. You cannot move the bars individually with this add-on. But you may notice that I have the top bar moved so that it's no longer shunted off to the right like it normally is. By default, just imagine that this first button is moved to the end over here. That's what it's like by default, and it's awful. I don't know what numbnuts at IMC thought that that was a good idea. It drives me fucking batshit, and I hate it. So what I did to move this top bar over to the left is I made my own damn add-on that unshunts that bar. It is called Unshunt That Bar. You can find it on the add-on manager. I highly recommend downloading it if you play in mouse mode or keyboard mode. I mean, unless you just don't care, or for some reason you like that. If you actually like that that bar is shunted off to the right like that, please tell me in the comments why you actually like that. If there's a reason for that, that people actually prefer, I'm very curious to know what it would be. So please, post in the comments if you have a reason to like that bar being shunted off to the right like that. Personally, I can't fucking stand it. Okay, so next up, where are we at? Target buffs. Okay, minimap is next, and this will only move the actual map. It does not affect these buttons down here. It does not affect the channel selector bar, and it does not affect these buttons that hover around your map. So if I move this, we see only the map moves. The other components are moved separately with their own individual item entries in the add-ons menu. I can't move it back to 70. I had moved it back to 70 in the last take, so I know it's possible. You know what? I'm just going to click the cancel button. Yeah, that worked. Okay. And, okay. There we go. Get rid of those rest quick slots. Okay, extended UI, where are we at now? Because we're going through all of these, if you hadn't noticed. Summon info, target buffs. Okay, we're pretty much right at the bottom now. Okay, so next we have the God Protect button. This is a very counterintuitively named item. This is actually the Goddess's Grace button. If I click that here, you'll see I have my Goddess's Grace button right here, which is great because I know some people, like myself, would have this bug where the Goddess's Grace button would just never show. But thanks to Extended UI, I actually have access to my Goddess's Grace button now. For the longest time, I wondered how the fuck do people access this event? And people would tell me, oh, with the button next to the minimap. I said, there is no button next to the minimap, but there is now thanks to this add-on. So if you have that bug where the Goddess's Grace button will not show, having this add-on installed will fix that. You'll be able to see your Goddess's Grace button. So that's marvelous. Thank you, Mizuki. 1,000 times. Thank you, Mizuki. Minimap, okay, buffs. Again, you'll notice these arrows on the 4 items after this buffs frame. That means this buffs frame is a parent item to these sub-items that belong to it. And it is indicative purely of a region. So if I click this, then this button, this frame in the menu allows us to customize the region for our buffs. And why has this been moved? This is very peculiar. This is supposed to be right here. I don't know why that moved on me, but yeah, okay, there it is. Now, your buffs, all of your buffs, there are 4 different kinds of buffs. There's self-applied buffs, that is to say the buffs that you have given to yourself. There are the unaffected buffs, that is to say your like permanent buffs, like your tokens or statue worshipping or the Skeed or your team level bonuses and that sort of thing. These are unaffected by anything. There's nothing that can overwrite them, and there's like no limit to them, and you know they're just passively there. And so those are your unaffected buffs. And then you've got your debuffs. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then you've got buffs from other people. So each of these 4 things are their own respective items. As of, I believe, the June 2nd, 2020 patch. So we've got self-applied buffs, which, why is that moved? That's, whoops. It's supposed to be right here. I don't know why my buffs have moved around on their own. I've never had this happen before. This is somewhat embarrassing. You know what? I'm going to click cancel again. I'm going to take a look-see at my buffs. I'll try to. Self-applied buffs. Yeah. Okay, buffs. Let's make that taller. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Strange. I don't know what happened. Okay, so you know what? Let's save that. Save and close. Okay, good, because you do need to click the save and close button in order to really apply the changes. So, okay, this darkened buffs area indicates the region that your buffs can be seen in. If I were to take my self-applied buffs and move them with the Y bar so that they were outside, to lower them outside of the region, they would no longer be visible. And that's no fun for anyone. What in the F? Why? Now, buffs from others seems to not actually be affected by fill direction, like these flow direction options for some reason. So Mizuki, if you're watching, please fix the flow direction on buffs from others, because that doesn't work. Okay, now I'm gonna save and close that. What I did to make this stop happening. And for now, I'm just gonna move on, because this is taking up way too much time. So character status, this is the last thing, and that is what I call your unit frame here. Excuse me. Sorry, I suffer from chronic heartburn. So this this unit frame, your character status, as the add-on calls it, is your like class icon, party leader hat, and your HP bar, SP bar, and stamina bar, and your level and your name, your team name, or character name. Character name, I think actually. I'm not sure, but I think it's character name. And this all moves as a unit. But something you need to know about this particular frame. It took me a while though before I realized this. The region for this frame will suppress mouse activity. So if I were to take my buffs and put them inside of this frame, which actually I think I kind of did, self-applied buffs, and character status. Okay, yeah, just a little bit. But if I had this this buff frame moved down a little bit so that it's inside the region of character status, and if I try to mouse over that, see, I can only mouse over it in the tiny little sliver that's outside of the region. And if I were to try to right-click on it to remove the buff, I can't. So this region, and only this region, none of the other regions do this, only this region will suppress mouse input. You also cannot click in this area of the screen for mouse movement either. So keep that in mind. That is an important thing to consider. And that is the end of the list. You can also actually move this without the UI, the add-on UI, which I hate because that means I can accidentally move my unit frame. Mizuki, please give us a lock option for the unit frame. Please and thank you. So that about covers everything. Those are all of the things that you can move with the add-on. There are several things you can't move with the add-on, like you cannot move, for example, the Necromancer Corpse Parts bar. And the reason for that, apparently, I have inquired about this, is because Mizuki Belhi does not have a Necromancer and does not care to make one to do the necessary testing that would be required to find out the information needed to program movement for that particular element. You cannot move these buttons down here. Maybe they move with the bottom right menu. Let's find out. Menu, will those move with it? They don't. Okay. So yeah, you cannot move these settings menu buttons, system menu buttons. You cannot move the escape menu buttons. Furthermore, the escape menu itself, you can't move this. You cannot move your inventory or your F1 menu. Any of these like panes that fly in off the side of the screen, you cannot move any of those. You can't move like your storage. You can't move the indone menu. Can you move the indone menu normally? I don't think so. No, okay. So yeah, you can't move the indone menu. You cannot move the chat log. That's a big one. Apparently, though, there's a really good reason for that. Apparently, Mizuki had originally coded the add-on to be able to move the chat log, but it destroys FPS. As I understand it, it's something about like the add-on and the game engine are constantly fighting for the position of the chat log every single frame, and that just destroys frames because the game is just putting so much effort into keeping the chat log where you put it instead of where the game engine wants it. So that's my understanding anyway. And so the bottom line is a good reason why the chat log cannot be moved. And, I mean, it's not the end of the world. I can live with that. And there are, of course, some other things you can't move. Anything that I did not explicitly mention in that list of items cannot be moved. But that is pretty much everything that actually matters can be moved. So, you know, that's great. And again, my struggling with the buffs there, please don't take that as a normal thing, because it's not. I've been using this add-on for months, and that's never happened before. So I imagine it's some kind of bug that will be corrected when I restart my game client. I'm going to try that as soon as I'm done recording this video. I think that about covers everything. I can't think of anything else that I would like to say about this add-on off the top of my head, aside from the fact that, in my opinion, this is the single greatest Tree of Savior add-on out there. If I could have only one add-on installed, it would be ExtendedUI2. Because I am never going back to the default interface. Screw that. So go get it. Go install it on the add-on manager. I'll be making a video about that later. And enjoy it. Manipulate your user interface. Violate it if you should so choose. And also get my Unshunt That Bar add-on while you're at it. That is Unshunt That Bar, just like that. And you can find that. Oh, and the add-on we're actually talking about, ExtendedUI2. This is how it will be formatted in the add-on manager. At least I'm pretty sure it is. It might be like this, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it's like this in the add-on manager. But don't quote me on that. I honestly might be wrong. So yeah, go install some add-ons, have some fun. I'm going to be making at least 1 or 2 other add-on videos. I'm probably going to make one on Zoomy Plus. I might make one on Status Point Check. Treasure Map is a really good add-on as well. I recommend that one. Shop Helper is nice. Adds some more information to player shops. That's all I can think of off the top of my head, although I'm pretty sure there are a couple more that I use, but I'll probably make a video on collection of add-ons that I recommend. Muteki 2 EX, I've already done a video on that one. Great add-on. You should check that out. So, yeah, that's about it. Have fun, and go save some goddesses. And please help me. She's going to shoot me. I don't know what to do.